Okay, we're going to talk about page 2 of chapter 3 in World Geography. We're discussing factors affecting climate. So section 2 is titled that. Okay, so some of the major factors that affect climate are latitude, depending on how far north or south you are from the equator, the elevation, if you're up higher in the mountains versus sea level. Here in Utah we have a good example of something that affects that. Down in Cedar City, southern Utah, they're about a little over 5,000 feet, pretty much what we are here in Fillmore. But then 45 minutes south of Cedar is St. George. And Cedar City, warm or hot, dry summers, cold, wet winters. And in St. George, they have warm, dry, or cooler, dry winters and hot, dry summers. They are really hot. So, but it's only 45 minutes difference. So the difference is that they drop in elevation 2,000 or 3,000 feet. Then wind and ocean currents, so your proximity to a landmass, because the temperatures can change as the wind blows over those waters. And then, of course, how close you are to mountains and other landforms. Okay, prevailing winds blow in fairly constant patterns. There are 3 types. There's trade winds, westerlies, and polar easterlies. So at the top you can see the polar easterlies blowing that direction, the westerlies here, and then there's the trade winds. I always use the example, back when boats looked like this and they were powered by wind with sails, that they would travel from, say, the United States over to Europe, down to Africa, and then back across to the United States. And they were following the trade winds, and that's why they're called the trade winds, kind of in that triangle pattern. They couldn't have gone backwards because the winds wouldn't have taken them that way. So that's, again, the trade winds. But then there's also some areas called doldrums, frequently windless areas at the equator. And then I have a story I heard, kind of an interesting one. So there was this ship with a crew, and they had some horses on board. And this ship got stuck in one of these doldrums. They just were not moving. And they spent days there and wondered, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of here? And what they decided to do was to throw the horses overboard, unfortunately. But for them, it was a good move. It lightened the ship enough that the little bit of wind that did come was able to move them on. So that particular area is called the horse doldrums. Okay, currents, cold and warm rivers of seawater in the oceans. So there are places that move a little faster and slower than others, and they'd have these different temperatures of the water as they move through. You can see these origin of ocean currents. So the red would be the warmer temperatures, blue, of course, the colder, cooler temperatures. It says the drag is exerted by winds flowing across the ocean, causes the surface layer of water to move. So that's what causes the waves out in the ocean. Winds are the primary cause of a surface ocean current. So as these waters move in the ocean currents, it's caused by the wind. Okay, so we're talking about areas, low latitudes. These are the areas between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, Tropic of Capricorn. And this is the area that has the direct rays of the sun. So here's the equator at 0, and then north and south would be the 23.5 degrees markers. Okay, so this band is the low latitudes. So 0, low, very low number, to 23.5 degrees. Polar areas are above 66.5 degrees, north and south latitude. And of course, those are called the Arctic and Antarctic circles. So this is one of those few places where you can actually stand and be photographed on one of those lines, the equator, the Arctic and Antarctic circles, the 45th parallel. There's places that mark off that special line. So polar areas. Okay, north and south of these circles to the poles, okay, are the high latitudes. So 66.5 degrees north and south, and then north and south to the poles would be the high latitudes, and between the tropics and the circles are the middle latitudes. So the very first one we mentioned was the low latitudes. Well, from 23.5 degrees north to 66.5 degrees north, that band would be the middle latitudes. Same thing on the southern end. Okay, air temperatures decrease with elevation, and the air is thinner. So actually, when we talk about height in the air, we should talk about altitude, and the word elevation has to do with height on land. But because the air is thinner, it does get colder. For example, if you go camping, you know, here in Fillmore in the evenings during the summertime, it's fairly warm. But if you happen to go camping, you're traveling up in the mountains, and then that evening, it's probably going to be cooler. So you might want to have a jacket or something up there. Wind and water combined with the sun is what help create our climates. We talked a little bit about hiking and Mount Everest at this point, but I won't do it here. We'll save it for our unit on India. Okay, land masses or surface features, again, can also affect climate in a big way. That's a very important one. The greenhouse effect, the atmosphere, keeps heat from escaping into space too quickly, and it helps plants to grow. So a lot of people are concerned about this, global warming. I'm not so sure. I think there is a trend that it is warming, but I think if you look at history, there are trends where it goes up and goes back down, and I think we're in an upward trend. There might be some of these factors that are helping it or causing it to increase a little more than normal. So we have the atmosphere, and then the sun's rays comes in, but then because of the chemicals that are in the air from these factors, that heat doesn't escape as quickly. And so that's what's causing the greenhouse effect. It's like when you park your car in the summertime. Okay, it was nice and cool inside with the air conditioning on, but then after you get done in the store, you get back in your car and it's just hotter than it is outside because the heat goes in, but there's nothing that can let that heat out until you open the windows. So we've got deforestation. Slash and burn agriculture is a type that's done in a few places, especially in South America, Africa. We have CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. We have oil and petrol or gas emissions from cars. And then we have factory smoke and pollutants that all can add to the particulate matter that can occur in the air and keep things from escaping. Temperature, of course, a measure of how hot or cold something is. And this is where I complain a little bit on the English language. So we say hot, and you eat your bowl of chili and you say, well, it's too hot. Well, is it temperature hot or is it spicy hot? We need to have a word that designates that, or I guess we could just say it's spicy, right? But anyway, so there's three types of temperature measurements. The Fahrenheit, one we use here in the United States, and where 0 degrees or freezing of water is at 32 degrees. Celsius, freezing of water is at 0 degrees, up to 100, which is the boiling point of water, 212 for Fahrenheit. Then we have the Kelvin scale, and that's based on absolute zero. I guess that's the coldest that the temperature can ever get is absolute zero. And so that's where that one starts, up to 373 for the boiling point of water, and freezing at 273. Okay? So that's the end of page 2. Thank you.